Hey everyone, if you're here, you're probably at least a little bit curious about the name Charles. And we are too, so get ready to go deep. Because today we're going to uncover some pretty amazing stuff about this name Uni. Things you probably won't find just by doing a quick internet search.
Yeah, Charles is one of those names that seems simple at first glance, but when you really dig in, it's got layers and layers of history, meaning, and even influence.
Absolutely. We've actually got a whole stack of sources here, and we're going to try to weave together a kind of deep dive into what makes Charles so much more than just a name. So, where do we even begin? I guess, like most names, we got to start with its origin, right?
Yeah, for sure. And luckily for us, Charles has a pretty clear origin story. It goes all the way back to an old Germanic word, Karal, which means free man.
Free man.
Yeah.
I like that. It kind of sets the stage for a name that's connected to, well, freedom.
Exactly. And not just freedom in the literal sense, but also freedom of thought, freedom of action, that sense of independence and self-reliance.
It's like the name itself is giving you permission to blaze your own trail, to be your own person.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the things that's so appealing about the name Charles. It suggests strength of character, leadership, even a bit of a rebellious spirit.
I can see that. And you know what else comes to mind when I think of Charles? Royalty. I mean, the name is practically synonymous with kings and emperors.
Oh, absolutely. Especially in Europe. Think about Charlemagne, or Charles the Great, as he's often called. His reign really cemented that link between the name Charles and powerful leadership.
Right. And then you've got all those English King Charleses, some more successful than others, but all part of that royal lineage. It's kind of funny how pop culture is obsessed with those royal Charleses.
Oh, yeah, totally. They're everywhere in movies, TV shows, even memes.
But Charles isn't just about crowns and thrones, right?
Definitely not.
I mean, we also see the name connected to figures known for their piety and leadership within the church.
That's right. Like St. Charles Borromeo, for example. He was a major figure during the Catholic Reformation, really pushed for reform and renewal within the church.
So it's like Charles represents this inherent drive to lead and inspire, whether it's on a throne, in a religious setting, or even in the world of ideas.
Exactly. It's about making an impact, leaving your mark on the world.
Which brings us to two figures who really embody that idea. Charles Darwin and Charles Dickens. I mean, talk about revolutionizing entire fields.
Oh, absolutely. Darwin's theories on evolution completely changed our understanding of the natural world. And Dickens' social commentary and incredible storytelling still resonate with readers today.
What I find fascinating is that they both embody those core Charles traits we've been talking about.
You mean curiosity, intellect, a strong sense of responsibility.
Exactly. It's like they took that free man spirit of the name and channeled it into these incredible achievements that still impact us today.
It really makes you wonder if there's anything a Charles can't do.
I know, right? And speaking of Charles doing things, did you know that this name travels really well?
Travels?
Yeah, it pops up in different languages and cultures all over the world. It's like it's got this global passport.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Like you got Carlos in Spanish-speaking countries, Carl in Germany, Carlo in Italy. Each variation reflects the unique flavor of the culture, but it's still recognizable as Charles at its core.
That's so cool. It really speaks to the name's enduring appeal, its ability to resonate with people from all walks of life.
Okay, ready to add a little mystique to our deep dive?
Mystique.
Yeah. Our sources mention some interesting connections to numerology and astrology associated with Charles.
Oh, now this is getting intriguing. Tell me more.
Well, numerologically, the name Charles is linked to the number 3. It's all about creativity, expression, and charisma.
That makes sense. Especially when you think about some of the famous Charleses we've talked about, like Charles Dickens with his amazing storytelling abilities, or Charlie Chaplin, the silent film legend who captivated audiences with his charm and humor.
Right. It's like that number 3 energy is woven right into the name itself.
And it doesn't stop there. If we look at astrology, Charles tends to align with traits associated with the signs of Leo and Gemini.
Ah, the lion and the twins. What do those signs tell us?
Well, Leos are known for their leadership qualities, which we've definitely seen in a lot of Charleses. And Geminis are all about communication and connection. They're curious, adaptable, and always up for a good conversation.
So it's like we've got a name that's rooted in strength and leadership, but also with a dash of creativity and charisma sprinkled in. It's like a recipe for making a mark on the world.
I like the way you put that.
And you know what else is interesting? The sources even mention specific colors linked to Charles.
Colors. Now I'm really curious.
Yeah. blue and gold.
Those are powerful colors. What do they symbolize?
Well, blue often represents wisdom and loyalty.
Which definitely resonates with the many Charleses who've dedicated their lives to knowledge and service.
Exactly. And then gold symbolizes prosperity and high ideals.
Which ties back to that connection to royalty and achievement we talked about earlier.
It's amazing how even colors can add to the identity of a name. But we can't forget how Charles has shaped the stories we tell. Literature and film are full of characters named Charles, each one embodying different aspects of the name's potential.
It's almost as if Charles has become this archetype for exploring human nature.
Right. Like Charles Ryder from Evelyn Waugh's Brideshead Revisited, he's this complex character grappling with his own beliefs and desires.
And don't forget Charles Foster Kane from Citizen Kane. His story is all about ambition, power, and the search for meaning.
It's fascinating how those themes of introspection and searching for truth keep coming up.
It's like the name Charles invites us to look beyond surface appearances and delve into the complexities of the human experience.
Okay, so we've covered royalty, saints, literary giants. It's time to bring it all together. Let's focus on some of the most impactful figures who've been given the name Charles.
Sounds like a good plan.
We've seen how Charles has graced the halls of power, revolutionized science, and captivated us with stories. Each of these individuals, from monarchs to artists to thinkers, has contributed their unique talents and perspectives to the world.
It's a pretty incredible legacy, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And it speaks to the enduring power of a name. It's more than just a label. It's a thread that connects us through time and across cultures.
They're so true. It's like a shared heritage for everyone who bears the name Charles.
Speaking of heritage, what are your thoughts on the impact of Charles on everyday people? I mean, not every Charles is going to end up in the history books, right?
Right, but that doesn't mean their stories are any less significant. After all, it's the everyday Charleses who are out there living their lives, shaping their communities, making a difference in their own unique ways.
Exactly. And our sources actually touch on something called name psychology, which explores how our names can influence our personalities and even our life choices.
Name psychology, that's fascinating. I've never heard of that before.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting field of study. Some researchers believe that a name like Charles, with its strong historical associations and that inherent meaning of free man, it can subtly shape a person's sense of self, their values, even their aspirations.
So you're saying that just being named Charles might give someone a subconscious nudge toward leadership or independence?
It's certainly a possibility. Of course, it's not a guarantee. Everyone's different, and our experiences shape us in countless ways. But it's intriguing to think about how those subconscious associations might play a role in someone's life.
I can see that. It's like the name becomes a part of your identity, a whisper in your ear, reminding you of your potential.
I wonder if parents who choose the name Charles for their children are drawn to it because of those qualities.
You know, I bet a lot of them are. Whether it's a conscious decision or not, names definitely carry a certain weight of expectation.
It makes you think. Are there studies that have looked specifically at people named Charles?
You know, I'm not sure about specific studies on Charles, but there's been research showing that people are often drawn to careers that align with their names, even in subtle ways.
Wow, that's wild. So a Charles might be more likely to become a lawyer or a politician, maybe even an entrepreneur.
It's definitely possible.
Fields where those leadership qualities we talked about would come in handy?
Right. But remember, this is all about tendencies, not destiny.
Right.
Ultimately, who we become is shaped by a whole bunch of factors.
Okay, that makes sense. So while we can't predict someone's future based solely on their name, it's still interesting to think about how those subtle influences might play a role.
Absolutely. It adds another layer of complexity to this whole exploration of names.
Speaking of complexity, one thing that strikes me about Charles is how it seems to transcend trends. It's a classic name that stood the test of time.
Yeah, it really has. It doesn't feel tied to any specific era or fad. It's just timeless.
And I think that speaks to its inherent strength and versatility.
Exactly. It's a name that can be both traditional and modern, strong yet sensitive. It embodies this balance of qualities that are universally admired.
It speaks to values like integrity, resilience, and a drive to make a difference.
Values that are always relevant no matter what's happening in the world.
It makes you wonder how the perception of Charles might continue to evolve in the future.
Oh, for sure. I mean, the name is constantly being reshaped by the individuals who carry it. They're adding their own stories, their own contributions to its legacy.
Think about how Prince Charles, now King Charles III, has brought his own unique perspective to the monarchy. He's focusing on issues like climate change and social justice.
He's definitely challenging the traditional image of what it means to be a royal.
And it makes you wonder what kind of impact future generations of Charleses will have.
What legacies will they create? What challenges will they face?
It's exciting to contemplate.
It really is. It's like we're witnessing a living, breathing legacy unfold before our very eyes.
This ongoing story of the name Charles.
And that's the beauty of names. They're not static. They're dynamic entities. They evolve alongside humanity.
You know, as we've been diving into all this, something's been bugging me. We've talked about kings and scientists and artists and all these impactful Charleses, but we've been missing one very important category.
Oh, what's that?
The personal connections. Have you ever known anyone named Charles?
Actually, yes. I had a childhood friend named Charles. He was such a creative and adventurous kid, always coming up with crazy ideas and getting us into all sorts of mischief.
It sounds like he embodied that free man spirit we were talking about earlier.
He definitely did. We haven't spoken in years. But I often think about him and wonder what he's up to now.
It's funny how certain names can evoke such vivid memories.
It really is.
Makes me think about my own grandfather, who was also named Charles.
Oh, really? What was he like?
He was the kindest, most gentle soul you could ever meet. Always had time for everyone. And this infectious laugh that would light up a room.
Oh, that's so sweet.
He wasn't someone who sought the spotlight, but he had this profound impact on everyone who knew him.
It's amazing how those quiet forces can leave such lasting impressions.
And I think that ties back to what we were saying about the everyday Charleses. They might not be world famous, but they're making a difference in their own unique ways.
Exactly. It's a beautiful reminder that greatness comes in all forms.
So as we move into the final part of our deep dive, I think it's time to address the elephant in the room.
The elephant in the room? What do you mean?
Well, we've talked about all these amazing Charleses, kings, scientists, artists. But what about the most impactful Charles of them all? The one who's probably the most beloved and recognizable figure to bear this name.
Oh, I think I know who you're talking about. You mean Charlie Brown.
Bingo. We can't possibly wrap up this deep dive without giving a shout out to the iconic Charles Schulz creation.
You're so right.
It's amazing how a cartoon character can embody the essence of a name so perfectly.
I know, right?
Charlie Brown, with all his good intentions, his struggles, his never-ending optimism, he represents something universal about what it means to be human.
Absolutely. And it's fascinating how his name, Charlie, that shortened version of Charles, it somehow makes him even more relatable, adds a layer of vulnerability and endearment.
I agree. It's like by calling him Charlie, we're acknowledging his flaws, his everyman quality. And yet, despite those flaws, we still root for him. We see ourselves in him.
Exactly. And that's a testament to the power of great storytelling, how a well-crafted character can transcend the page or the screen to become a cultural touchstone.
And I think Charlie Brown's enduring popularity speaks to something deep about the name Charles itself. It's a name that embodies both strength and vulnerability, aspiration and humility.
It's a name that reminds us that it's okay to be imperfect, to stumble and fall as long as we keep getting up and trying again.
And that's a message we can all relate to, no matter what our name is.
So true. As we wrap up this part of our exploration, what are some key things you'd like our listeners to take away from our discussion so far?
Well, I think we've definitely established that Charles is more than just a name. It's this tapestry woven from history, culture, and personal stories. It's a name that evokes a sense of timelessness, of strength, of making a difference in the world.
Beautifully said.
And I hope our listeners are starting to think about their own names and the stories they carry.
That's a great point. Every name has a story, and every story deserves to be told.
All right, so we've explored the history, the symbolism, the impact on individuals. We've even shared some personal connections to the name Charles. But there's still one more aspect we need to dive into.
Oh, I'm intrigued. What else is there?
Well, we've talked about the impact of individual Charleses. But what about the collective impact? The legacy of the name as a whole. That's what we're going to explore in the final part of our deep dive.
That sounds fascinating. I'm ready when you are. You know, when you think about it, Charles as a name, it's been around for centuries. It's seen empires rise and fall, wars won and lost. It's witnessed incredible advancements in science and technology, yet it still feels relevant today.
It's true. It's like it's woven into the fabric of history. But it's not just about the big events, right? It's also about the countless individuals who carried this name throughout time.
Absolutely. Every Charles has contributed to the name's overall legacy, whether they were a king or a commoner, a scientist or an artist,
It's like each one adds a brushstroke to this giant canvas.
creating a richer and more complex image.
And that image, that legacy, continues to evolve, doesn't it? With every new generation of Charleses.
Exactly. And that's what I find so fascinating about names in general. They're not static, they're dynamic, they're constantly being shaped and reshaped by the people who carry them.
It makes me wonder what the future holds for the name Charles.
Good question.
What new meanings will be attached to it? What kind of impact will future Charleses have on the world?
Only time will tell. But one thing's for sure. They'll be building on a pretty incredible foundation.
Speaking of foundations, let's shift gears a bit and talk about something a little more personal. Earlier, we were talking about how names can subtly influence our personalities and choices.
Oh yeah, name psychology.
Exactly. And I'm curious, has thinking about the name Charles brought up any personal memories or associations for you?
Actually, yes. It's made me think about my favorite uncle, who was named Charles.
Oh, really? What was he like?
He was a really kind and gentle man, always had a smile on his face and a twinkle in his eye.
Sounds like a lovely person.
He was a teacher, and he had this amazing ability to connect with his students. He made learning fun and exciting, and he really inspired them to be their best selves.
It's incredible how one person can have such a profound impact on others.
It really is, and I think it speaks to the power of human connection. How even small acts of kindness and compassion can ripple outwards and create positive change.
I love that. And it makes me think about all the Charleses out there who are quietly making a difference in their own communities.
Yeah, the ones who might not have their names in history books, but who are nonetheless leaving their mark on the world.
It's a beautiful reminder that every life has value and every contribution matters.
Absolutely. And it brings us back to that idea of legacy. It's not just about fame or fortune. It's about the positive impact we have on others, the way we touch their lives and make the world a little brighter.
And I think that's a perfect note to end on for this part of our deep dive. We've explored the history, the symbolism, the personal connections. And now we're ready to delve into the ultimate question. What is the legacy of the name Charles? That's what we'll be tackling in the final part of our exploration.
Can't wait.
So we've talked about individual Charleses and their impact. But what about the big picture? The overall legacy of the name Charles? What kind of mark has it left on the world?
That's a big question, but I think it's an important one. When you talk about legacy, we're talking about something that endures, something that transcends time and individual lives.
Right. It's about the lasting impact.
And I think Charles, as a name, has definitely left a lasting impact. Think about all the different areas we've touched on: royalty, religion, science, literature, even pop culture.
It's like the name has permeated every aspect of our collective consciousness.
Exactly. It's woven into the fabric of our history and our culture.
And it's not just about the famous Charles Xavier's, right? It's about all the everyday people who've carried this name throughout the centuries. All those individual stories, all those contributions, big and small.
Absolutely. It's a collective effort, each generation adding its own layer to the legacy.
And what a legacy it is. I mean, we've talked about kings and emperors, saints and scholars, artists and revolutionaries.
All these individuals, each in their own way, have helped shape the world we live in.
It's pretty awe-inspiring when you think about it.
It is, and it makes you realize that legacy isn't just about what you achieve in your own lifetime. It's about the ripple effects of your actions, the inspiration you pass on to others.
The connections you make, the values you embody.
Exactly, and I think that's one of the most powerful things about the name Charles. It represents this idea that we're all part of something bigger than ourselves.
That we all have the potential to make a difference, to leave our mark on the world.
Whether it's through grand gestures or simple acts of kindness.
And that legacy continues to unfold with each new generation.
I wonder what future historians will say about the impact of Charles. What new chapters will be added to this ongoing story?
It's exciting to think about, isn't it?
It really is. Who knows what amazing things future Charleses will accomplish?
Maybe they'll be the ones to solve climate change, or find a cure for cancer, or achieve world peace.
Anything is possible.
Well, as much as I'd love to keep speculating about the future, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive.
Sounds good to me.
So before we go, let's take a moment to appreciate the incredible journey we've been on. We've explored the history, the meaning, the symbolism, the cultural impact. We've even shared some personal stories and reflections.
It's been quite a ride.
And I hope our listeners have come away with a newfound appreciation for the name Charles, for its depth, its richness, and its enduring power.
I hope so too. And I hope they'll be inspired to think about their own names and the stories they tell.
Because every name has a story, and every story is worth sharing.
So true. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Until next time, keep exploring the fascinating world of names.